Hello, my name is Justin St-Maurice, and I was recently elected the president of the Guelph Hiking Trail Club. I recognize that people might not necessarily know who I am, and I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself. And what better way to introduce myself than to do that in the style becoming of the Guelph Hiking Trail Club. I have here for you today a quick little trek and tell that will help you get to know me and what I'd like to do in my role as the president. So, my job. I work for a company called Infotech Research Group, and we sell subscriptions to companies around the world. And part of the entitlements that people get out of that subscription is that I have to go visit them for 2 days once a year. And so, over the last several months, I have been meeting a lot of those obligations and traveling around North America. I've been to 22 states in the last 6 months. And I have had my fair of little adventures. For example, I was able to see the Kansas City Chiefs play the Baltimore Ravens. I went to the Green Bay Packers Stadium, and I was the only person who showed up for a tour. I ended up at a place called Buc-ee's in Alabama with my colleague Nate. I was in San Diego at some shipyards. And I was also in a few places where I'm frankly not allowed to take any photos. Now, one of the people that I work with operates out of a trailer. And he did that because he retired, came out of retirement to help his company. Great guy. But it wasn't clear where exactly I would be meeting with him for his 2-day on-site entitlement. And after some negotiation and some back and forth, we eventually picked the location for our meeting, which was going to be in a trailer park in Granby, Colorado. That is 2 hours north of Denver. It's also 45 minutes away from the Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, fun fact about this trailer park, you can either stay in a bungalow, you can stay in one of the silver bullets, or you can opt to stay in one of the wagons. Now, being a grown adult, I think it's pretty clear that I picked to stay in the wagon. Now, I will tell you that the wagon is either very, very hot or very, very cold, and it doesn't really have anything between those extremities. And I was there in that wagon, and it was uncomfortably cold. Now, I also want to point out this little green bag, and if anyone has trouble packing efficiently, I will tell you it is possible to put 5 days worth of clothes, a tripod, and an SLR kit into a carry-on bag and bring it with you to Granby, Colorado. If you want to save on checked-in luggage, you can do it, and it is doable. And so my second night where I was in Granby, Colorado, where it was cold, there was a train at 4 a.m. Because apparently trains like to go through Granby, Colorado at 4 a.m. on a regular basis. And so I was awoken, and I realized that I normally wake up at 6 a.m. Eastern, and that I was pretty well rested, and I was curious about the possibility of exploring the night. And so I popped my head out of this wagon, and I saw that the stars were absolutely perfect. There was no cloud in the sky, and I had a decision to make. Either I jump in this car and I head off to the Rocky Mountain National Park to see the sunrise and get some star photos, or I go back to bed. And I decided to head out on a little adventure instead of going back to bed. Now, people will tell you that as you drive through the Rocky National Mountain Park, that you will run into animals. And I'm going to tell you that, yes, there are a variety of animals on the road. There was moose, there was some deer. They were all very, very confused about what I was doing in the middle of the night on their road. I'm happy to say there was no injuries and everybody came out of the situation quite well, but there was a lot of slowing down and checking of eyes and looking at each other until I was eventually able to get up to the top of the mountain. Now, at the top of the mountain, I was actually able to get a few cool photos. This is a sample of a night sky that I captured on my digital SLR. And it is neat, and you can see the car there and everything, but it's also a little bit disappointing because the Milky Way is right there, and I didn't leave my lens open long enough to properly capture it. And as a hobby night star photography person who doesn't get his gear out very often, I'm also left a little disappointed because I did not, in that moment, hold my shutter open for an extra minute, and now that opportunity has been lost. But this photo, regardless, will remind me of that night at the top of that mountain where my cell phone didn't work, where there was nobody else around and there was no clouds and a beautiful night sky. I will always be able to cherish that moment in the outdoors. I eventually moved from this location and went to the visitor center, and I was able to see the sunrise. And it was another really quiet, breathtaking moment. Normally the visitor center is crawling with people and I was the only one there. And eventually a city appeared in the distance and I was able to get several shots to remember the moments. I eventually went back down the mountain. I saw the valleys light up with color and drove down into Granby, Colorado to go back to what I had to do as part of my work engagements. At the end of that day, I had the choice about how I wanted to get back to the Denver airport, and I decided to go the long way, and I drove through the Rocky Mountain National Park, and I was able to see a lot of very, very beautiful things. It is one of the most lovely drives that you could possibly do. It'll take you about an hour and a half to drive all the way through, but you will see some of the most splendid scenery that is possible. There's also some hiking to be done. I went up a short little hike and I found this sign. And this sign really explained to me why I was really very much out of breath and why I was gasping by the time I got to the top of that little hill. I am walking about 2 hours a day. I'm in pretty good shape, but an elevation of 12,000 feet without any acclimatization is a little bit difficult. And so I invite you to consider going to the Rocky Mountain National Park, finding some hikes, checking out the scenery. It is very, very much worth it. Now, the other thing that I'm going to recommend is that you check out some of our local hikes in Guelph. Yes, I do travel. I see a lot of different things, a lot of different trails. I get to go to a lot of different communities, and I'm very comfortable telling you that Guelph is special. And what we have in this community for hiking is something that is unique. The rivers that we have that give us those mirrored photos, the adventures that I get to go on with my dog Cindy Pofford, the canopies that we see, and the shadows and the games that we can play are incredible and unique. And when I think about what I want to do as the president of this club, well, I want to keep the momentum that we have going. The club is doing really, really well. But I also want to make sure that we think about the future. And I want to make sure that these beautiful trails are available for my children, for my grandchildren, and for all of the generations to come. We've done a lot of great work over the last 54 years at the club, and we need to make sure that we hit 100. And we're going to hit 100 by doing some modernization and by building on what we already do really, really well. And I'm really excited to make sure that we have a trail system in the future that everyone is going to be able to enjoy.